Hello, this is Gaius' Grimoire, and I am Gaius. I'm going to dovetail off a topic I mentioned last episode regarding franchise role-playing games and talk about franchise role-play games and how the Fanon elements that fans, usually the admin, interject by design. And this is going to talk about really forum roleplay, because you can get away with it more in tabletop with how game systems can be Frankenstein together. But in forum it's different because it's free form, which means, in a sense, it becomes the Wild West of story ideas. But I'll get into examples of that. Last episode, I mentioned my first ever roleplay was an original Star Wars forum. So I will briefly touch upon the fanic aspect that was involved in that game. But of course, I'm not going to say that too much, because I'd like to talk about the roleplay in full later down the line. I'll divide this really into two parts: a custom faction and a custom species that I played. I wasn't part of the faction, I only had the custom species. I'll do the latter first, because that sort of has an interesting story behind it. I mentioned my Sith on the forum with Darth Sparka, but I did not mention what species or race he was. Due to my love of Zabraks, mostly due to Darth Maul, but I didn't want to rip off the character, so I created a new species, and was not challenged on this in any aspect, but I created a Zabrak human hybrid. Now, those of you familiar with the expanded universe, usually the current or present day expanded universe, you might know why this is no longer an issue. Long story short, there was a retcon involved with the CGI Clone Wars cartoon, where the Dothamirian species from Dothamir became Zabrak human hybrids. So my little bit of fan canon fixed itself. So I can now play a Zabrak human hybrid in any Star Wars game completely legitimately. But the larger occurrence of fandom in that roleplay was a custom faction who call themselves the Mechanists. And they existed as an ally of the Republic purely to build custom ships, custom blasters, custom armor, custom anything, which mostly consisted of pictures of modern stuff that they pulled off of the internet and said, this is this now, including Flame Saber, which I think might be a mod for one of the Knights of the Old Republic games, but it was the idea of this flaming lightsaber. They were allies of the Republic, and thus many of the members were Force sensitive. But rather than say they were Force sensitive, as canon would say, they called themselves half Jedi, which allowed them to use lightsabers. Not even fallen Jedi or former Jedi, but half Jedi. But that's a story for another time. The story I would like to tell involves the roleplay that I was involved in, that took the Fanon of an established franchise to an entirely different level. In my fairly early years of forum roleplaying, I started with a circle of people who formed that Star Wars RP. And they were also the people I ended up playing Conquer with, for the record. They continued on and off, and while my brain, trying to remember this, believes that it might not have been a complete falling out, but I ended up stumbling upon the second edition of an Avatar: The Last Airbender roleplay with a small and similar feeling community. And I say second edition because the admin had this odd habit of, whenever a forum became inactive, rather than sending out emails and trying to get people on board, she would send an email out saying that there's a new forum. So basically, when the forum died, she would reboot it into, whatever 2, whatever 3. I came on in the second incarnation in 2005, December 2005, less than a year into my role-playing career. And since already, as it is still today, I love playing villains and using destructive powers, like Force Lightning. So I made a firebender who I named General Spelka. The originality is unbelievable. And because I ended up giving myself a ship on a private island, it was later retconned that I was an admiral, but he started as a general. See? Makes perfect sense for a general beyond on the ocean now, wouldn't it? I made him and dragged my two closest friends at the time who were into role-playing with me, both of which were part of the Star Wars RP as well. These friends being Virgil and someone who is unrelated to Saligia and therefore will go unnamed. On a side note, Virgil said that this Avatar roleplay was the point where he really got into the hobby. So you could thank me dragging him into new Avatar roleplay for the existence of Saligia. And he actually ended up becoming, because he was an Earthbender, becoming king of the Earth Kingdom. And since this took place prior to Book 2, not prior canon-wise, I mean when we were doing it, or playing it rather, Book 2 did not exist yet. Or at least they didn't get to Bossing say. So that wasn't much of an issue. I can go on to tell the story of Admiral Spelka and King Zykos another time, and I probably will, because there are many interesting stories. It ran from the second edition to the third, if I remember correctly, for a good amount of time, on and off. And there were a lot of fun stories, including an incident of godmodding that I used against Virgil that he would never let me live down. Still doesn't. But let's get into the actual RP. The admin was a young woman who practiced Wiccanism, or at least claimed to. And that gave her character and the roleplay a unique feel. Because it works really well in a universe full of element-slinging martial artists. But the Fanon was not neo-pagan and Germanic in nature. It ended up going the other way and getting a very strong JRPG vibe. First off, the admin's character was an avatar. I say an and not the, because unlike the Star Wars RP, this wasn't set in an alternate universe with all original characters. Characters from the show weren't only encouraged, but they were widely available. You didn't even need to prove your skill as an RPer. You just needed to say, I want to be Katara. Boom, you're Katara. Actually, Azula was a regular character in the plot. So we have this avatar. She was a female avatar and of Earth Kingdom lineage, which not only destroys the cosmology of the Avatar universe, but undercuts the actual line of succession, which is fire, air, water, earth. And you can kind of see this as, or at least to give it a name, admin god syndrome, or admin power syndrome, where the admin's character has to be special, and has to have this power or this ability that no other character possesses. You actually do see this a lot in JRPG forums that I've been a part of, where the character is, you're chosen or part of this mythic race, or has these magical abilities that you can't really get, or no one else can get. So that's sort of a taint to the anime or / JRPG style roleplay. And it occurred here. This admin, who, if I haven't mentioned that already, because I went on a little bit of a rant, was Princess of the Earth Kingdom, and an avatar. So she was the only one who could wield all four elements. And I know that, because on the forum, I tried. I tried to get my firebender to also learn earthbending, and I was told, no, you cannot do that, which, as I should have. Dual avatars aside, there were other elements in this roleplay that were JRPG Fanon. Dragon Men. Prior to Book 3, where the proof of dragons were proven in the Avatar world, this roleplay had a humanoid dragon man. Much like the Dragonborn from D&D, now that I think of it, and this dragon man, the only one, I might add, had green scales and wings, and could airbend. That is right. This avatar not only let you create airbenders, which you should have been allowed to anyway, but you already had a second avatar, what the hell, and one was a flying dragon man. While on the topic of airbenders, there was a character with two children who was a waterbender, one of which was a waterbender, and the other was an airbender. Not odd considering the later Legend of Korra Mako Bolin situation, but she was a waterbender, as was her husband. The genealogy and canon would not allow there to be an airbender, ever. But that's just nitpicking, and it's nothing to do with the point I was going to make. I am unable to remember if her husband was a member who became inactive or an NPC, but she somehow became single during the storyline. And one of my friends, not Virgil, was a waterbender who ended up marrying her and ultimately married into becoming Prince of the Northern Water Tribe. And here comes the JRPG stuff. I forgot why, but at some point, I think it might have been before his character and this woman were going to have a child because they got married, so on and so forth. He decided to run into the wilderness, claiming to be dangerous, and he was sure that he was going to turn into some mindless Hulk-esque rage monster due to a curse or some bollocks that I don't honestly remember. I do really believe, looking back, that this was inspired by a JRPG. He was a fan of the Tales series, that Namco series of JRPGs, particularly at the time, Tales of Symphonia. And if I recall correctly, there was a monster in that game that was, actually there's a series of monsters, there's numerous, that were experimenting on humans and they mutated into this bizarre Cthulhuoid creature. So I factor that in with him turning into a rage monster, which I don't believe he ever did. Makes it clear that it was JRPG inspired. Going down the list, I had a kitsune. Spelka had a kitsune animal companion, a nine-tailed fox that wielded fire. There was an earthbender who manipulated sand and called himself Gaara, from Naruto fame. So, this Avatar roleplay went into JRPG anime territory very quickly, and stayed there. I don't know if they continued with the later incarnations, but when I left, it was still in anime territory. I think the guy who made the Dragon Man might have not done that anymore, but a lot of that was still there. You might be listening to all this and asking, what's the point? The point is, and this is true mostly for forums and the like, not necessarily tabletop games, when you play a franchise, you can add your own spin, and you always have to attract players. Like a new planet in a space opera, or if you're playing Pokemon or something like that, you can add your own region or your own country. But you can't really overwhelm the narrative or the canon with your new additions, because at some point you have to ask yourself, do you want to play this game or not? Of course, you can add your own twist, but you cannot cloak yourself in the skin of a franchise or the appearance of a franchise, especially a popular franchise, and then completely do your own thing while claiming to be true to the franchise. If you want an alternate universe with all original characters, perfect. But you cannot have your cake and eat it too. If you have original characters and canon characters living in some sort of harmony and coexisting in the universe, there needs to be a much more stricter code of what is kosher in that game. If there are no dragon men in your franchise, I do not advise putting dragon men in the game. I advise against it. There shouldn't be dragon men, or the like. It works better, and this is just my opinion, oh well, I still don't like this very much, in Star Wars, or Star Trek, or another space opera, or science fiction, where you have near-human species who can interbreed with humans. Then it's more likely. Your Zabrak humans, and the like. Another example, if there is a single Messiah character, an avatar, perfect example I've been using, there can only be one. You can't have another one and then coexist with the original. Again, tabletops get away with this, because you could Frankenstein games together, a la Savage World or GURPS or stuff like that. And you could do it on a forum too. As I said, the anime crossover I did. But you have to be true to every franchise involved. You cannot just say, we're playing Avatar, but you could do all the JRPG stuff you want. Or, we're playing Star Wars, but you can fly the Serenity. Actually, that's a bad example because Firefly does the ship from Firefly appears in a Star Wars comic. You know, something like that, where you say, you know what, you can just do whatever you want, just as long as you call yourself a firebender or something like that, it's fine. Yeah, so you have to remain true to those franchises. Otherwise, why even play a game with a franchise? Why not just do your own RP to begin with? And I'll tell you why. Because for the most part, original fantasy roleplays on forums do not do as well as franchise roleplays. Because original fantasy RPs, you have to graphically appeal to them on the site, which means you have to do a lot of your own work. And then you have to have a story, and you have to have this universe that people have to be involved in. And universe building or world building is difficult. It's not easy. If it was easy, you know, everyone will have this George R.R. Martin Game of Thrones style world, or this Tolkien style world if world building was easy. And it's not. And a lot of these, and I know this from experience, a lot of these fantasy RPs say, you're a wolf, and this is some kind of magical fantasy wolf pack, go do magical fantasy wolf stuff. It doesn't really give you a universe because they're making it up as they go along, because they don't even know. But if you put yourself in this franchise, someone else's work, someone else's world, you can have all the, what's the word, all the appearance of a role play, whether it be Avatar or Star Wars. But now you can do your own things in the background, so your writing becomes a lot easier because you get to make up things as you go along. And at that point, why even play? As I said, why even play in the franchise? That's all my take. As I said before, I would really like to revisit the Avatar story as a whole in another video, and not point out the flaws, because these weren't all necessarily flaws. It was an extremely enjoyable RP. Just in hindsight, I don't think it was true to Avatar. So, but it was extremely enjoyable, and I would like to do a video talking about all the fun things I had. And even the things I pointed out, my character spent a lot of time with the Dragon Man. We were friends. As I said, my friend turning into a rage monster. I was with him during that story. I was a part of that. It was fun. So don't take these as negatives. They're just critiques, looking back. And that is, it's hindsight. I wasn't thinking this at the time because I was having fun. You can get away with stuff like this if it's fun, but I don't think it's a good idea. If the comments, even though, again, this is YouTube, if the comments sort of argue whether you could do Fanon stuff, especially in a roleplay, I might revisit it. If I see that people are making points, or if somebody says something that I didn't consider, I will most likely do a recording, however brief, to sort of either challenge those points, or to at least to make people notice them. But I am going to leave that here. I'm going to end the video here. I called it a video again. It's not a video, it's a recording. I don't know why I keep calling it a video. But, again, the same question I'm going to pose to you all for the comments as the one in the introduction. What is the most bizarre franchise you have ever roleplayed? I believe mine is Conquer Live and Reloaded. And I'd like to see what you guys think, regardless of the medium. It could be you RP'd it on a forum, at the table, on Tumblr, Reddit, wherever, the strangest thing you ever roleplayed. And I'll watch the comments, and I may mention some of them in a future episode. See you next time. Bye.